Everything you're about to hear is for education and entertainment purposes only. Whilst we are licensed, we're not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Any advice is general advice. Equity Mates operates under Australian Financial Services Licence 540697.
Equity Mates!
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Well, welcome to another episode of Equity Mates. This is a podcast where we explore what is possible in the world of investing. And for the first time ever, we are coming at you live from Brisbane. It's epic to be here. Full house, couple of seats left down the front if anyone's standing at the back. And if you are new here and you have no idea who we are, my name is Bryce, and this is Ren. How are you?
I'm very good, Bryce. Very excited for this episode. Very excited for this live show. Our first time in Brisbane. We were worried no one would come, so thank you that you did. You've reassured us we'll definitely be back, depending on how tonight goes, I guess.
Yes. Now, what to expect tonight? We are recording live, so those that can't make it can listen, but we will have, we've got a couple of segments. So we'll kick off with, we're obviously here to talk about property versus stocks, but what we're not going to be doing is actually putting them head to head to see which one comes out on top, because our belief is that you should be able to do both. So we are going to start with the segment on what we have learnt doing 8 years of Equity Mates, 8 lessons through 8 years. We'll then bring on Sam Gordon, our property expert, and he's going to talk us through how building wealth in property. And then we've got a bit of a game to close with Deal or No Deal.
Now, we want to say a massive thank you to Sam and the team at Australian Property Scout for sponsoring tonight and making it possible. Sam Gordon is considered to be one of Australia's leading buyers agents, and I'm not just saying that. In 2020, he won Australian Property Investor of the Year. In 2024, he won Buyers Agent of the Year. He also just won Gold Coast Entrepreneur of the Year, and now he's going for the Aussie title. So make sure you get around him. If you are interested in getting into the property market, if you find that prices in Brisbane are out of your price range, maybe speak to Sam, because what he and his team do is scout deals outside of the major capital cities and, helps people get into property. So we love what they're doing, and we're excited to chat to him later, but thank you, Sam, for making this possible.
Building wealth through stocks. We've been doing Equity Mates now for 8 years. Started back in 2017. We celebrated our 1000th episode earlier this year, from memory. And we've interviewed, I think, close to 500 experts now. So we're going to go through some of the key lessons that we've learned over that period of time, and I guess what the fundamental principles that we think are important when it comes to building wealth in the stock market. And the first one is that investing is for everyone.
You're about to see some shocking slides, so just strap in for that. If you think about the perception of investing, it's seen as too risky or too hard to understand, and the stock market isn't for everyday people. You need a advisor that a lot of us can't afford, or you need to work in the industry or to train in the industry. But I think what we've learnt over the journey is that really investing is for everyone. It's never been more accessible, and it's time to get started. It's
been a good journey for us. I think if we look back when we started investing, just the accessibility of it as well. Like Ren and I were paying almost $20 in brokerage when we were with CommBank, and now you can almost get it for free depending on what you're buying. And we had to start with $500, and now you can get in with as little as $1. So everything is there for everyone in this room to start investing.
Yeah, we know there are some people that have been dragged along tonight by their friends or family members that are like Equity Mates and are skeptical about the whole thing. So to you, there's no excuse to not get started investing.
Which leads to the second one. If we can do it, you can too.
Look at that hair. God.
We're both not from a finance background. I'm from, I started my job as in retail at Woolworths as a strategy analyst, and Ren was in Coles. And so I think the fact that neither of us...
It's fitting that we're in a comedy club tonight, because for the first few years, well, maybe still today, we were the joke of the finance industry. It was like, who are these two idiots doing an investing podcast? What can they teach us? What we realised early on is that, anyone can do this. It isn't just for the experts and those, with the degrees or in industry. And I think our story is if we can do it, anyone can.
Next, number 3. We all lose money.
Yes, this one hurts. But I think you only hear about the wins in a lot of financial media. You don't hear about the losses, and we have made hay out of some of these losses because I think it's important. Like you look at the best investors of all time, and they have had shocking losses. Jim Simons, probably the best investor of his generation, or one of the best investors of his generation. He batted at like 51% success rate. Warren Buffett has had massive losses, and so have we. So this is my very first investment. You can see the chart there. Slater & Gordon, a law firm, still exists today, no longer listed for that reason. At uni, I started saving up, working part-time jobs. I was building furniture in a warehouse and delivering it around Canberra, saving up on the side, saving up. Got my first $1,000, put it in the stock market, lost so much money that I couldn't even cover the brokerage cost to sell it at the end of the day. $1,000 turned into 12. Brokerage at the time was $19.95. So that sat in my account.
Did you tip in more to sell?
No, eventually brokerage came down. No, eventually they cleaned up the register and just bought my shares back off me. Full $12 in the pocket. But I think, from that, it was a good learning experience and stuck with it. But I think where we want to start is everyone loses money. It's okay. Like it's the persistence and the habits that matter over time. But it's not just me. Bryce, you've also lost money?
I have, yes. So this is one of my stories. So this is Magellan, the company, not the fund. And I bought it early days 2021 at $53. It was sort of touted as the next Berkshire Hathaway, and the thesis was that they had this incredible fund flow and it was just going to go on and do wonderful things, and they were investing on their balance sheet. And you can see where that thesis was broken. Very soon after I bought it at $53, it absolutely collapsed. It subsequently went up, and I didn't take that moment to recognise that the thesis had broken, and I went on the other side of the argument and said, when things are down and out, put more money in. So I put more money in at the green, and then it went down further, and I remember being in the office, I said, this is our moment. Warren Buffett would have said, when others are greedy, be fearful, be greedy. So I threw in more, and then I held all the way down there until $7.92, and I think I lost about 85% of my money. The biggest learning for that, though, was that whole thing where people ask us, how do you know when to sell? And you sell when your thesis is broken, and that's it. And for me, that moment was actually early, not too long after I bought it, but I got sort of blindsided with other key lessons that we'd learnt along the way, but didn't weight it towards selling when my thesis had broken. So we've lost a lot. Lesson number 4, before we show the slide, for those that have been avid listeners, we've spoken about this number a lot on the show before. Who can tell us what the average return for the Australian All Ordinaries has been since 1900? Average annual return, yeah? 13.2. Get this guy a beer, which we're paying for. Get him a beer. Correct, 13%. The lesson here is that the average return on the stock market is more than enough.
We told you there would be some shit slides. Have fun reading this one. The important numbers on the first picture, bottom right, which is the average, it's 13% there. It came down a little bit from the 13.2%. But what the point we want to make when we say the average is enough is, if you're new to investing, you think about investing as buying individual stocks, but these days you can buy ETFs that let you buy the whole market in one transaction. These days you can buy it from as little as $1. And the scenario that we've charted out on the right, if you invest $100 a week for 30 years in just the average Australian market and get that 13% return, 30 years later, you got $1.5 million. So I think when you think about like the perception of investing and like what it is in pop culture, and when you're listening to experts, it's like you've got to be active, you've got to find the next thing, you've got to constantly be looking at charts and studying, and you can do that, there's nothing wrong with it, but what we're saying is the average is enough. You don't need to do any more than buy a little bit of everything and get on with your life.
Number 5 is automate as much as possible. This has probably been a recent development for us in our investing journey, primarily because of, I guess, the tech that's now available through a number of the online brokers. But one of the biggest challenges we face as investors is cognitive bias and, getting out of your own way and removing the emotion from your investing is one of the biggest things that you can do to improve your long-term returns. The more that you're trading, the more that you're trying to time the market, the more that you're getting in the way of yourself, the more that you are likely to erode those returns. And so automating the process between getting paid and making an investment is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do and that we both do in our investing journey. And we outline it in 4 steps in the book.
Yeah, the people often ask what's the difference between the 2 books. We didn't do a great job of explaining that on the cover. That was our bad. But the second book was we realised a whole bunch of our mates, a whole bunch of our family members would never listen to our podcast. They didn't want to listen to us talk about investing a couple of times a week. And so this was the blueprint for all those that just wanted the benefits of investing without doing any of the work. But I think the automating is so important because study after study shows the more you engage with the market, the more activity you do, the worse you do. There's a Fidelity study, some people question whether it's real or not, but it's kind of investing folklore that Fidelity looked at their best performing accounts over in the US and they found that the best performing accounts were people who had died. Just because there was no activity. They just bought and held. There's a psychologist over in the States, Paul Andreessen, who did a study and found that your investment returns are worse the more you engage with the news. So the news prompts you to do things, you inevitably deteriorate your returns. So automating it, getting the thinking out of it, is the best way to just be consistent and be disciplined.
So we effectively wrote this book to put ourselves out of business because if you follow what is in this book, you don't need to do anything. The 4 steps are essentially get paid, automate, buy a bit of everything and repeat. And what we mean by that, and this is how we do it, is we get paid, we have automatic transfers that then go straight to our brokerage accounts, and then we have a broker that automates the investments into a core portfolio of ETFs. Call it 60 to 80% of what we want to invest on a monthly basis. And to the slide before where, the average is enough, that's just going into core index ETFs that are going to give you global exposure and that sort of 9 to 13% year on year. And then we just do that every fortnight, every month, whatever it may be. And genuinely, that is a strategy that is enough for 95% of the people in this room.
To be honest, it's what your super's doing. 80% of your super money's doing that. If there was a bit of jargon there, but we explained it all in the book. All right, shameless plug over. Number 6. If you think about investing, look, and we're guilty of this tonight, but so much of it is set up as this adversarial thing. Should you be investing in stocks or property? Should you be a value or a growth investor? Should you buy individual stocks or ETFs? All of this, you have to pick a side is just not right. There's plenty of ways to make money in investing, and you can find an example of someone who's done well in every single way. So I think what we've learned over the journey is early days we felt like we had to pick a side. And a lot of people might feel that way. They might find someone online or they might read a book that advocates a certain type of way and feel like they've really got to plant their flag and commit to that. But what we've learned is everyone is 80% right, 20% wrong, and you can learn from everyone and just take the best bits from everyone. So that's why we're getting Sammy Gordon up here, because we're not all in on equities.
Number 7 is that there is $1 million isn't out of reach. You can become a millionaire. If you've listened to the show before, this is something that we rave about. Get out the compound calculator and do this yourself. But here's 2 examples that kind of show how you can become a millionaire with small dollar amounts. Again, might be hard to read the slide and we'll talk through it. Or if you have a shorter amount of time, again, how you can easily become a millionaire.
If you've got time but you don't have a lot of money, even just starting small and being consistent can get you close to $1 million. And then on the flip side, we said, well, what if you don't have as much time? If you're in your 50s and you're getting close to that 40s or 50s, you're getting close to that retirement age. Obviously, you have to invest more, but even in a shorter period of time, there is still benefits to investing because that $1 million mark, which it feels like a lot, it feels out of reach, but when you actually do the maths and you look at the rate of return you can get it's possible.
And then finally, don't forget your superannuation. I think a lot of people, when they start listening to the show, I'm not investing, I know nothing about it. I think the most powerful free kick that we have in finance or in our life is our superannuation account. And if there's anything you do to optimize your journey, if you feel like you can't be putting any more into the markets beyond, what you're currently doing with your mortgage or whatever it may be, make sure your superannuation is optimized, because everything that we've just spoken about happens within your super fund, but you also get the tax benefits of it.
Now, we've done a bit of a scenario to illustrate that. So superannuation contributions are taxed at 15%, concessional contributions. Compare that to your marginal tax rate. For people who are working full-time, it will be at least 30%, probably 37% for a lot of people. So we said the median Aussie salary is $1,300 a week. You get 11.5% super, which is just shy of $150 a week into your super over 30 years at a 10% return. If you invest outside of super, $806,000. If you invest inside of super with that tax benefit, $1.1 million. So that's roughly a $300K difference for doing nothing other than directing money to your super. So I think super's often forgotten. It's often neglected until we're a little bit older, but just don't forget it's the most powerful thing that we have to get ahead.
But now I guess it's time to bring in none other than Sam Gordon.
G'day fellas, g'day guys. Nice to be here.
Have people heard Sam before on the podcast? Give us a little shout or something. Yeah, there we go. So for people who haven't, Sam is the founder of Australian Property Scout. They've got a goal to retire how many people?
500 people by 2030.
Yeah, using property investment.
Yeah, mate, that's the vehicle.
How many of you retired so far?
It's a growing journey. It takes time, right? Property is one of those things, it takes time to obviously build wealth. There's a lot of people a long way along on the journey as well, man. So it's cool. It's really cool.
Nice.
Before we get into the specifics, so this segment we're going to start with just the fundamentals of building wealth in property, and then go through some of the specific strategies that you can take depending on where you're at in your property journey. You don't have a property, you might have one, you're looking for an investment, and so on and so forth. So before we get into those specifics, Sam, what are some of the key characteristics of property that make it such a good way to build wealth?
The biggest thing I believe with property is the ability to leverage, right? So if we look at the difference between property and stocks, that leveraged return it's unmatchable, right? So the easiest way to put that, if you have $100,000 you can go out there and put into a marketplace in shares or stocks, it's a direct return on that $100,000. But if you could leverage that $100,000 into a $500,000 asset, your growth is actually on the actual asset, right? On the property. So on the property value. So that $500,000 asset, if you got the same return across both of 10% across both, you get $10,000 for your stocks, but you get $50,000 for your property. So that ability to leverage gives you such a higher ROI. But then the real power in it is then being able to strip that capital back out, so that deposit back out, as it were, and then be able to roll into another property. And that ability to leverage, in my opinion, is the strongest thing there is, well, one of the strongest things there is about the property market, and about property as an asset class. And if we were to go head to head, that would be my very strong argument to keep pushing on that.
I would also argue that you can leverage into the stock market, but I just find it, this is going to go down a tangent, but I just find it interesting, the psychology of people to mortgage themselves up to their eyeballs and take that risk in property and have that leverage position where you can do the same thing in stocks and have equally as great a return without the hassle of stamp duty and all the likes, and not necessarily leverage so much. But
when you understand the ability of what you can do with leverage in property, so people talk about limitless lending, right? When you understand how to work property properly with lending, it is limitless. So you can continue borrowing. I built a 20-plus property portfolio. I'm making less than $100,000 a year. That was through intelligent, creative lending. And when you understand how to do that, the way you can stretch that, grow it, build it from that perspective, I'm going to say from my perspective, it's been ridiculous, so.
Yeah, that's fair.
For the people that are aspirational first home buyers who want to get on the property market but haven't, how should people think about concepts like rent vesting and what should they be looking for when they're looking at properties?
There's multiple ways to kind of look at this as well. And I think if you haven't bought anything yet and you're trying to start out and you're saving that first deposit, rent vesting and not going and looking at buying your own primary residence is probably one of the biggest things. Your ability to save, and we were talking off stage about the the difference in cost of actually owning your own home versus renting as well, right? And even getting that first deposit. Even though there might be grants and whatnot that you could take advantage of from it, if you can buy in at a much lower entry price and buy into a market that's potentially got higher growth potential as well, the ability to do that, and then if we look at other strategies you can do for, buying below market value, buying in the correct growth location, doing value adds through renovations and whatnot. And if I was a young fella out there starting again, that's exactly what I did. Forced a lot of value through renovations and really made sure I was knocking all those things on the head. And you're going to get a better cash flow buying in a different area, lower purchase price with better yields. It's going to allow you to keep growing the portfolio and building it harder and faster from there. So if I was starting out again, I definitely wouldn't look at buying my primary residence. It would have to be, there's 15,000 suburbs in Australia, right? So for you to be in the top, let's say 1% of investment locations in Australia, it's a tiny, tiny percentage and a tiny amount of suburbs. The idea that you're going to be able to find a much better, location elsewhere is definitely there. So I'll be focusing on that. And I do a real audit on what you're doing in your life as well. We had an investment story this week, an investor story on Scouting Australia. And the young fella, Bailey, who's actually my partner at the back there, Morgan, it's his brother, her brother, and he sold his first ute because he said, I don't know what to do, it's going to take me 3 years to save this deposit again. But he bought a ute at 20, paid it off by 23, 24, and when he sold that, he used that as his first deposit. And in 12 months' time, he actually built a 3-property portfolio off that one deposit, off that one sale. So it's doing the things that 99% won't do, what 99% of people won't do to get that 1%, get the results of the 1%. So I think things like that and looking outside the box of how you can get that first deposit together is really key.
And for those who may not have listened to our episodes before with you, what is rent vesting?
Rent vesting is just pretty much renting where you want to live and then buying where it makes sense or where you can afford. And so often, especially now, like younger generation, in all the capital cities, it's so expensive to buy pretty much in any capital city. There's a different, undoubtedly better growth location they can buy in elsewhere. And that might sound crazy as well, you guys being in Brizzy and how much growth it's had over the last couple of years, pretty much since the start of COVID, but how much run does it have left in the tank? And also, if you look at the price point of where it's at now, you can buy in significantly cheaper in other areas. And then if you look at the cost of renting in that area compared to owning, especially with the current interest rates, it massively outweighs it. Even though rents might seem high right now, when you actually look at that cost difference of rent compared to interest repayments at the current interest rates, it's a significant difference and it's in favour of renting. So you're going to be able to save more, the more that you can save and the less that your outgoings are every week and every month, the more that the banks will allow you to put that into your serviceability numbers, which allows you to borrow more, save quicker, borrow more, leverage up.
So that's for people who are thinking about getting on the property ladder. The second group that we wanted to sort of speak directly to are those that have got their first foot on the property ladder, owner-occupiers, and they're thinking about, investing would be nice. One day they hear you're buying all the houses and they want to get them before you get them all.
Sorry, guys.
How do you speak to clients that are in that position?
Especially, again, if we were talking Brizzy, which is obviously in the room, almost all capital cities, if we're talking to the rest of the country on the potty as well, there's been quite a good level of growth over the last couple of years. So what I'd be doing is I'd be getting bank valuation done on the property, see what the thing's worth. One of the biggest mistakes I see is people just go for one val and they go to the bank that they bought it from and they get it valed up and it doesn't value and there's not enough equity and they just leave it at that. I'd be banging down the door of brokers, get me multiple vals, see what this thing's worth, what can we get it valued at, and pull some equity out. If you've owned property in Brisbane for over the last 6, 12 months or longer than that, you've definitely got equity in your property if you haven't tapped it. So I'd be getting that thing bank valved, see what you can pull out and then start the journey.
So how should we be thinking about growth v cash flow when looking for investment properties?
Just define that as well. Like what do you mean by growth v cash flow?
So looking for houses that are either going to give you capital growth over the long term or short term, depending on city that you're in, or looking for houses that might not necessarily be giving too much capital growth, but are going to spit out a yield that is positively geared, or at least you're going to be cash flow positive. Two different types of strategies. I
was going to say, because it's rare to find both. That's the premise, isn't it?
In this market, yes, because interest rates are where they are. It is quite hard to find both. Mate, what it always comes down to is where an individual is in their portfolio. So it always comes down to strategy. Anything you do in your journey, it should always come down to strategy. And what we always assess is what does someone actually need in their portfolio next? Because that's actually like asking or like trying to make a decision in terms of what property you should be putting in. It's the wrong question. It's what do I actually need next? Because that tells very quickly, very easily what you need and what you need to effectively go after and chase between the growth or the cash flow. Almost everyone needs to chase growth to begin with, because it's rare that people have a huge amount of cash that they can just keep going and going, right? If you have $100,000, $200,000, depending on your deposit amount for your first deal, you might eat that up literally in your first deal. And if all you do is go chase cash flow, that could be where you immediately tap yourself out. Whereas if you go put it in the correct growth market and the correct growth property that grows for you, you're able to pull that equity back out. And we see it a lot with people with commercial. They go commercial very, very early and they haven't built the foundations yet. You have to build the foundations so then you can start tapping equity and pulling equity and going into multiple deals. Cash flow deals and commercial deals and things like that, they have their place, but it's typically not at the very start. So for me, it's always a case of what do they actually need in the portfolio, and then people might go, oh, but I don't want something to cost me $5,000 a year, negative cash flow, whatever. As of now, we still have negative gearing in place, and it doesn't, it looks like it's staying around. If I was to look at it, something costing me $5,000-10,000 a year to hold that thing, which with current interest rates is realistically where it is for the most part now. If something was costing me $5,000 a year, it was a $500,000 property. If you did 10% growth, which most of our markets that we bought in Australia this year, if you look at Perth, we're talking 40% plus growth this year. Ridiculous. But almost all markets have been 20 to 30% that we bought in late last year, started this year. Even 10%, but in the course of a year, is a $50,000 return on that $5,000 cash flow. So people get really fixated on something that might cost them a little bit every week or every month or every year or whatever it is. But you've got to focus on what is actually going to keep moving you forward in the journey. And if that is equity at that point in your piece, is that foundational play the foundational play. Be strategic with it, put the right things in that's going to keep you moving forward, not just worry about that $100 a week or whatever it might cost you.
So I think if we just pause here, I think it's worth reflecting on what we've covered off so far. It's like Bryce and I started with the share market, and I think what we really wanted to get across was how easy it was to get started with such small dollar amounts. Whatever you have, however much you can afford, it's a great place to get started. And then as you take those next steps on the journey, all of these options open up to you, and it's not just about can you buy property in your backyard and if you feel priced out, there are other options out there to get started. If you're an owner-occupier, you're slowly paying down your mortgage, there are options to take that next step. I think that's what we've really learned. And, Bryce and I are two idiots doing a podcast who've never worked in finance. Sammy was, not earning a heap of money as he got started on his journey and, got to 20 properties on a labourer's wage, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the message that we want to really get across at this point is there's always the next step. The next step is always available. You just got to figure out what it is and what you can do. But Sammy, what we see so often, especially with property, probably more than shares, just because of the leverage piece and stuff like that, is people can often put a foot wrong and they can sort of blow themselves up at different times. So what are some of the most common mistakes you see when people try and take that next step on their journey, and how do you counsel your clients to avoid them?
There's a lot that people make the mistake on early. Probably the biggest one is buying the wrong property in the wrong location. So the backyard example of buying something like that. Alongside that is something, a lot of the time people think they're doing the right thing. That's trying to take advantage of the grants, right? The first homeowner grants. They might go out do a new build or something like that. They get sold into a house and land because they can get the grants as a first home buyer. It's almost always a terrible investment. Almost always as well when you're trying to buy in your own backyard, it is like the example before, it's not the best location in the world to be buying, the best location in Australia to be buying. So be very much taking those things into the equation. Some of the other big things is people buying to their max capacity. So they go to the bank and the bank goes, you can borrow $1 million, beautiful, and go buy $1 million property. If the name of the game or the aim of the game is to try and build wealth in property, going and maxing yourself out in your first deal is literally one of the worst things you can do, combined with all the other things as well. One of the huge things, massive misconception in Australia, especially for a lot of people starting out, is needing a 20% deposit or trying to avoid lender's mortgage insurance, LMI, which is anything over an 80% loan on a property you have to pay. But I would stress, especially if people are starting out, embrace that. Embrace LMI. Almost all my first, I think it was 11 deals were all 90 to 95% lens. It was crazy, right? But I was a really low income earner, and I was scraping deposits out of every deal that I did, pulling it back out, going into the next one. If I never embraced lender's mortgage insurance, I definitely would not be on this stage. I don't know if I ever would have got started. That's one of the big things, but embrace that. There's different ways around it to maximize it. You could do 88% lens if you got that little bit more. It cuts your LMI in half, but embrace things like that, and then do your research. Probably one of the biggest, probably the biggest thing is not getting educated. All those things I spoke about then is a result of not being educated. Take your time, get your head around it, or engage someone that can help you make that correct decision. But if you're going to go it alone, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're going to go it alone, get yourself educated. It might take you 2-3 years to save your first deposit, or 12 months, whatever it is. Don't get your deposit, go get your pre-approval and go buy something, and not actually educate yourself on that side of things first. That is the biggest mistake we see is people just rush in from that end, and then you regret it for a long time. Like, you buy a wrong property, it's not one of those things that it's like, oh yeah, I burnt $500. Like, you can burn a lot and get yourself stuck. And that lesson, you might learn a lot from it, but you don't want to learn that lesson.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the transaction costs and all of that, it's
opportunity cost, man. Opportunity cost is the biggest thing. Like, if you buy the wrong property, wrong location, wrong price, house and land, lock yourself into something for 3 years, and then valve falls short, you can't even settle it, or you have to put in cash to settle it. Like, what's the opportunity cost of what you could have gone and done elsewhere? So, yeah, get educated, make the right call, and buy the right first property.
Love it. We should say as well that, Sam, you still rent as well, so you're doing what you're saying.
100%.
Yeah, rent vesting.
Massive advocate of it for sure.
Love it. That brings us to the final segment where we really want to put all of the action, or everything that you've spoken about, and make it a bit more realistic. So we've got a number of properties that we've pulled from realestate.com that have sold over the past 6 months from around Australia. And Sam's, and I'm hoping none of them are anyone's properties here in the room tonight, because there are a couple of Brisbane ones. And Sam's going to give us a bit of a deal or no deal on whether or not it's something that he think is, it's a deal or no deal. And I guess the point is to understand, and you'll see it through the properties that we put up, that we see it on the news that everything's $1 million plus or whatever, but the space that Sam's playing in is far more accessible, I guess, for a lot of us. So
when we look at like the most powerful things in property, there's two things I was just going to call out. Obviously, the leverage and the ability to keep pulling on that end, but layering strategies, man. Like, it's like, again, we look at Morgan's portfolio. I look at what I did my own portfolio. When you look at layering strategies, like, that's what's crazy. So, like, the most simple thing to make a lot of money is buying the right market, right? And it's easy to say that. It's another thing to produce it. You buy in the right market, you buy that thing at a discount, you force some value on it, and you pull that equity out and you roll into another deal. Like, layering those strategies on each other allows you to build a portfolio, but then it just, that continual compounding effect of layering those things on, and you don't need to layer everything on top of each other, but the power in that, because you're immediately gaining a return on it even before the growth comes through, you can be a real game changer when you combine those things. That's how you can really build a big portfolio. So even if you start with, say, the share side of things, then build your first deposit and then go out there and do it, and maybe you put the rest of your savings back into shares to build that up while the property does its thing. I think a diversified portfolio is smart and intelligent, but like layering things on it, not just going, well, I read about this one place and that property looks okay and I can buy it. Like, it's being smart with it and then layering strategies on it. That's how you can really take it to another level.
What we've learned speaking to more advisors on the podcast is the combination and the interplay between the two is where the real wealth is unlocked. You know, like, debt recycling seems to be like a real topic of conversation at the moment, but where you are using your property investment and then you're recycling that back into shares and you're building wealth both ways is where you can really start to accelerate your journey. So look, we sold this as property v stocks, and we are not having that debate because both work. So sorry about that.
Property wins.
all right, well, let's crack into it. Deal or no deal? First cab off the rank is my hometown of Wagga Wagga. All right, so $690,000 house, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, great family home in Lloyd on a massive block. What are your thoughts?
Is this your folks' home?
No.
It's for sale, guys, ready to go. The number is 04. What's your number?
Yeah. So I think what we want to do with this segment, it's obviously called Deal or No Deal. We want Sammy to say deal or no deal, but we also want him to draw out like what the green flags or red flags are for anyone who's looking at property at any stage, owner, occupier or investor. So If you don't want to buy in Wagga, that's okay. Hopefully we get some lessons for wherever you're looking.
So the first thing I'd look at of this, guys, is location, right? So location's always the first thing. You could get a $100,000 discount, but if you're in the wrong location, they're just going to go down. It's not going to do anything else. So if we look at Wagga as a location, it had a decent run during COVID, but it's probably, I think over the last 10 years, sitting about 60, 70% per annum over that 10 years, so 67% over that time frame. There's still potential growth in the tank. There's the inland rail link going near it as well. So there is kind of potential from a growth side of things. You got a pretty big block, you're quarter acre, Lloyd's on the outskirts, 4x2, 700. I personally wouldn't buy it, but I think you could potentially, the area kind of warrants maybe a little bit of further investigation what you could find, but personally, no deal for me.
Okay. Sorry, Bryce.
Exactly what I was thinking. Hobart, Tasmania.
No deal.
Nice.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Done. Move on.
Sorry to any Tasmanians.
Do you want me to do a little dissection?
Give us the spiel.
That's enough.
Hobart started its run in 2015, ran really hard for 4 years, cooled off just before COVID, had another kick in COVID. It has had a huge amount of growth. If you'd bought in 2014, 15, 16, you would have done really, really well. Even in itself, but I hate units, hate townhouses. You got body corporate, paying $685. That thing probably rents for $550 a week plus body corpse, and the market's cooked. So
nice, that's easy.
Hey, for that price, you could buy a whole house in Wagga.
It's the same money as the 900 squares.
All right, Hobart's out. Perth. Loving Perth.
Now, Sammy did say that Perth has run very hard recently. 40% over the last year in some places?
Yeah, this location in particular, we bought pretty hard for clients 2020, 2021. It's up about, over 100% in the last 3-4 years.
Okay.
It's had a good run, yeah.
But we're talking about it in 2024. Yep. So, Sam, deal or no deal?
So one of the other things to consider when you're looking at an area, almost everywhere has seen growth in the last 3, 4, 5 years to an extent. It's figuring out how much growth it's had and how much it's got left in the tank. I don't think Perth's fully done. It could have another 12, 24 months depending on the location. This property, I know this area really, really well. I actually own probably 10 plus properties within 5-10 minutes of this thing. Right, so I know this area very well.
For the rest of us, mate.
It's actually not a bad buy. For that money, for a 4x2, 700 square block, that road is non-beachside. So there's a different price, $100,000 price difference between beachside, non-beachside. But that actually isn't bad value. If you were wanting a decent win over a 12-month time frame and going to flip it, I'd consider that deal.
Would this be cash or growth?
Got growth for sure. Cash flow, you'd maybe be getting $600, $650 a week rent on it. But it would, I believe there's better areas, but if you were wanting a quick turnaround win of 12 months, it's still probably, that's probably $30K below probably intrinsic value as well.
And so a lot of the conversations we've had so far, Wagga, Hobart, Perth, have really been about the location. Wagga, inland rail,
always
more to
location.
run.
Yeah.
So how much of it is the quality of the individual asset versus the quality of the location?
Location will do 80% of the heavy lifting of an asset. So, but it's got to be the right price. So if you were to buy I bought a few absolute shitters in this sort of area and did them up, and but it just didn't really matter because a lot of the stuff I was buying was sub 300,000, so the location will do the heavy lifting, right? So I still made money on the deal on the way in, but the heavy lifting is done by the location. A lot of people get hung up on this as well. They see fibro shacks, or they see a fibro house and they think it's a fibro shack or weatherboard or whatever. If I draw an analogy to, or a comparison to two properties I bought in Adelaide, very, very similar time, they've both done the same amount of growth. The fibro house was actually about 30 grand cheaper. They've both grown by about 300 grand. I have never had an issue with the fibro house. The brick house that I bought just down the road was a nightmare for maintenance. It was just this one property in the portfolio that always just had something wrong with it, Quality of the asset is important, but it's not always face value what you see,
Next one.
All right.
So this is regional Queensland. Anyone here from Gracemere?
Rockhampton?
Come a long way. 528K. Regional, what have we got? 4-beddy, 2-bath. Big block.
Yeah, Rocky's doing pretty well. It's had a pretty good kind of 3 years as well. Gracemare's on the outskirts, 10 minutes out of Rocky. It's pretty much almost an entire new subdivision out there as well. Really good income to house price ratios out there. That's not a bad deal. If I could shave a little bit more off that'd be a deal. But that's that's not far off being a deal, and I think that area has good potential as well.
Nice, love that.
Okay, look at the outskirts of Rocky, everyone.
Take note.
Not financial advice.
Toowoomba, 654K, far, what do we got? 3-beddy, 1 bath. Exudes good vibes.
Exudes.
Nice.
What a word. That's a university word, that one, mate. Toowoomba's still got growth in the tank. I think proximity to Brizzy as well, it's decent. But we were talking before about layering strategies. I think this one's probably at market or maybe slightly above market. It's a good suburb, but you've got a finished product. Like, you've got a fully renovated finished product. If I was to try and buy something like that as well, try and buy a shitter for closer to 500 and then put some money into it to get the finished product like that. So that for me is a no deal. But yeah, you could create something similar if you were going hunting the basic version. Layering strategies, right?
So to unpack that further, is there, like, you're looking for houses that need work? Or would you ever be buying the finished product, or is it just never?
It always depends on the value. So, like, if you can get something at a great deal that's already finished, then yes. But this here, that's top market for what it is. So no, like, I wouldn't be buying that at that. But if you can get something that's good value, this is where it's like you could buy something absolutely beat up and you have to do the work, or something in the middle, or you buy something like this. As long as the price is right, the price is right. Yeah. So, but this thing's top price.
Okay, house in Melbourne. Melbourne's going backwards at the moment, or at least slowing down. 810,000 presence and potential in the heart of Coburg.
Yeah, no deal.
All right.
Just because it's Melbourne? Because everyone in Melbourne's moving to Brizzy?
Not just because... Mordor, right? Not just because it's Melbourne. I think, like, you're looking at the price point, the fact that it's a 2x1. I think when you had it on the map, it was extremely close proximity to a railway line as well. Or that run the whole way through is the railway line straight through the guts. So... yeah, it wouldn't be a deal for me. It's decent location, everything, but yeah, price point compared to yield and growth potential, there's better options out there for sure right now.
What about an apartment bang in the middle?
That's near a railway.
Yeah, let's keep going, boys.
Nice.
Hey,
all right,
Sydney.
closing out with Sydney.
Here we go.
An apartment, one just over $1 million in lovely Paddington. Easy walk to the city. 1 beddy.
Yeah,
what are you thinking?
No. That's a hard no.
1 beddy apartment for $1 million.
56 square metres. I think
This is yours, isn't it?
Yeah,
no, you're looking for vindication.
No.
That's a hard no. That's as bad as the South Bank or Southport, whatever it was down in
South Bank.
Yeah, down in the Melbourne, the one before it.
But because of the fact that it's a 1 beddy apartment for $1 million, or because it's in Sydney, or both?
Like you were saying before, location is key. That location's... It's not my apartment. That location's really good.
Location is key, but like what I'm saying is, like, location will do the heavy lifting. I'm not saying just because it's nice to live there. I mean, you're over 50 squares, so you can at least lend on it. Just something that most people don't know is the sub 50 squares actually typically 50% LVR as well. So definitely not something you want to touch. But no, man, it would not be what I'd be buying.
What would you pay for it? Question without notice.
Oh, I mean, if I get it for 500, I'd buy it.
Yeah.
All right. Are you selling, Bryce? Or?
Everyone give Sammy a round of applause. That was a lot of work, and we appreciate it.
You have been listening to an Equity Mates Media production. In the spirit of reconciliation, Equity Mates Media acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. This podcast is intended for education and entertainment purposes. Any advice is general advice only and has not taken into account your personal financial circumstances, needs, or objectives. Before acting on general advice, you should consider if it is relevant to your needs and read the relevant product disclosure statement. And if you're unsure, please speak to a financial professional. The hosts of this podcast and their guests may have positions in the companies mentioned. Equity Mates Media operates under an Australian Financial Services Licence 540697.